So we have with us two officials from the UN for the United Nations. One is from the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, my friend Zaved. We also have ONUDC, who is the specialized body in the field of drug policies. And we also have invited the Global Commission on Drug Policy, which is a very influential actor in the field of drug policy based in Geneva. And I will immediately give the floor to Michel Kazatchkine. I hope I did not destroy your name.
Thank you very much, Denis Huber, and good morning, everyone. My name is Michel Kazatchkine. I come from the HIV field. I'm a former executive director of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, malaria, and I have been a member of the Global Commission on Drug Policy since its inception in 2011. I'd like to thank the Pompidou Group for organizing this event and the invitation to speak today, and my thanks also to other partners, the European Union Drugs Agency, Correlation European Harm Reduction Network, the City of Strasbourg, and ITAC. The Global Commission was established, as I said, in 2011 with a clear objective to foster open, informed discussions about drug policies and promote reforms grounded in scientific evidence, public health, and human rights. Today, we are 27 commissioners from all corners of the world, and we're all united by a shared recognition of the failings of punitive drug policies. The Commission has set 5 pathways for better drug policies, ultimately calling on governments to rethink their approach to drugs and not to shy away from transformative potential of responsible regulation. These 5 pathways are as follows. 1, prioritize people health and safety. Drug policies must safeguard the right to health through prevention, harm reduction, and treatment. We must move away from enforcement-based approaches to health-centered interventions that reduce harms, including reducing overdoses, HIV, and crime. Second, ensure access to essential medicines. Over 80% of the world's population lacks access to essential pain medications. We call on governments to remove legal, regulatory, and logistical barriers to controlled medicines, such as morphine or methadone. 3, end the criminalization and incarceration of people who use drugs. The criminalization of drug use harms individuals and communities. The Global Commission advocates for the decriminalization of drug possession for personal use and the abolition of death penalty for drug-related offenses. 4th, refocus enforcement responses to drug trafficking and organized crime. Enforcement efforts should target the most harmful elements of the drug trade, not the users, not the low-level participants in drug trade. Governance must prioritize combating violence, corruption, and money laundering. And 5, and most importantly, regulate drug markets and end prohibition. Put governance in control. Governments should move towards regulating drug markets to reduce the harms of prohibition, using controlled access to substances that are currently illegal. Now, since its inception, the Global Commission has promoted human rights-based approaches to drug policy. We acknowledge the international guidelines on human rights and drug policy. We acclaim the commitment of the High Commissioner on Human Rights for for his efforts to raise attention to the ways drug policies intersect and must take into account human rights obligations. And I congratulate our host, the Pompidou Group, for your work in this regard as well, including with this recent publication earlier this year. As advocates for health and rights-based approaches to drugs, the Global Commission has long been vocal in our support for drug consumption rooms, as they represent a remarkably valuable intervention in the harm reduction toolkit, not only to help prevent overdoses or transmission of infections, but also provide, as we heard this morning, key linkages in pathways to other types of care and support, such as healthcare referrals, community support, and social services. Drug consumption rooms also provide a safe and trusted environment for people that are most often met with criminalization, stigma, and discrimination in their daily lives, and unfortunately also often in traditional healthcare settings. Harm reduction at its best goes well beyond just needle and syringe programs, opioid agonist therapy to treat opioid dependence, and naloxone for overdose prevention and management. Though, to be clear, these are also and obviously critical interventions. Harm reduction at its best is an ethic of care, one that engages people who use drugs with dignity, compassion, and empathy. In essence, an approach that affirms that people who use drugs do not forfeit their universal human rights by using drugs. This more expansive concept of harm reduction is also all the more necessary in today's world, as patterns of drug use, and certainly here in Europe and in many other parts of the world, have changed considerably since the emergence of the first harm reduction services in the 80s. Injecting drug use and heroin still require attention, and particularly in the central and eastern part of Europe, but we also have seen a diversification of use beyond heroin, as we heard from Alexis Gutzel earlier today, with increases in stimulant use, increased smoking rather than injecting, and the looming threat that synthetic opioids could infiltrate the European drug supply. This evolving context must push us to adapt our responses, including by expanding the use of drug checking and increasing the reach and range of drug consumption rooms, ensuring these meet the diverse needs of people who use drugs, including people who use stimulants, women, young people, and migrants. If you remember, the first harm reduction responses, needle and syringe programs, emerged as grassroots initiative, pragmatic, yet often unauthorized responses from communities seeking to protect their own in the face of opposition from officials from the local up to the international level. The compelling evidence of the effectiveness of harm reduction, coupled with sustained efforts from committed advocates, civil society, slowly allowed it to flow from local pilots up to national policies in many countries in Europe before it finally saw recognition in UN guidance. A similar progression can be seen with drug consumption rooms. However, this has not yet translated into UN guidance, something that we must continue to advocate for, as this would facilitate more countries and jurisdictions with the technical expertise and multi-stakeholder trust needed to pursue the initiation and expansion of these interventions. Harm reduction sites and drug consumption rooms are safe sites where people are exempted from criminal sanction for drug use or personal possession, where the right to health and public health considerations take precedence over existing prohibition policies. This has been clearly delineated in Canada, where a unanimous decision of the Supreme Court in 2011 regarding Insight, the first drug consumption room in North America, put the right to life and right to health of Insight's clients over efforts by the federal government to shut down the DCR. Quoting here the Supreme Court's decision, quote, "The potential denial of health services and the correlative increase in the risk of death and disease to injection drug users outweigh any benefit that might be derived from maintaining an absolute prohibition on possession of illegal drugs on Insight's premises." So, dear colleagues, Europe is diverse, national politics are diverse and evolving, governments come and go, and policies often change with them, but human rights are immutable. They are universal and not derived from the policies or preferences of a particular party or government. Since 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other charters have enshrined some fundamental rights: the right to highest attainable standard of health, the right to freedom from discrimination, to freedom from arbitrary arrest and detention, the right to equality before the law, to privacy, to work, to education, the right to share the advances of sciences. These are universal rights, and as we engage into discussions in the next couple of days, let us remember that they are also drug users' rights, and that we cannot fight or win the fight for the health and dignity of people who use drugs in Europe without also winning the fight for these rights as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michel. You mentioned in your speech the important work which has been made by the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, and indeed the High Commissioner has produced in August 2023 a very important report on human rights and drug policy. And I will give the floor now to Zaved Mahmood, who is a human rights officer within the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights.
Good morning. First, I would like to thank Pompidou Group of the Council of Europe for inviting the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to speak at this conference or symposium. Let me start with two phrases which our High Commissioner Volker repeatedly stated. First, war on drugs failed. Second, harm reduction saves lives. Nor punishment, nor war on drugs, not war on drugs, but more and more we see that human connection and evidence-based approach transform and uplift the lives of the people affected by drug use disorder. A new path is desperately needed because so-called war on drugs has neither reduced the drug use nor eliminate the illicit route of drugs or production of drugs. Instead, it stigmatized and isolated. At the outset of my presentation, let me emphasize that there is growing acknowledgement by state that discussion on drug policy must take into account states' obligation on human rights. We must build on this momentum. The original aim of the Drug Convention, International Drug Convention or drug treaties, was to protect the health and welfare of humankind. However, in the last 4 decades, drug control policies have primarily taken a punitive approach to suppress the illicit market, and many countries have adopted punitive repressive policies, with the serious human rights consequences. On several occasions, UN bodies, General Assembly, such as General Assembly, Human Rights Council, the Commission of Narcotic Drugs, or other related bodies, such as the International Narcotic Controls Board, have urged all governments to government and national authorities to consistently apply internationally recognized human rights principles and protection when designing and implementing drug control policy. In the next few minutes, I would like to unpack the concept of human rights in the context of drug policy, as discussed in the international guidelines on human rights and drug policy. Under the international human rights law, everyone is entitled to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health with no discrimination. Already Michel has highlighted this issue. The right to health covers the prevention, treatment, control of diseases and other health-related status, which include drug use disorder. This right also includes creation of conditions that ensure access to goods and services that are available, accessible, acceptable, affordable, and of equality without discrimination. Further, the right to health extends beyond the right health care to the underlying determinants of health, including the access to health-related education and information, housing, healthy occupational and environmental condition, participation in health-related decision-making at the community, national, and international level. In the context of drug use, it is key to both address these underlying determinants of health and adopt an intersectional equality and non-discrimination approach. Let me also highlight that under international law, everyone has the right to enjoy benefit of scientific progress and its application. This right has been recognized as being the instrumental to the realization of right to health and applies in the context of drug use disorder. When we are discussing about harm reduction measures, these are the scientific progress we have to recognize and ensure they're implemented. Right to health also comprises both freedoms and entitlements and is interconnected with economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights. Let me talk about, pick one specific right to health, how it is related to right to life. Under the concept of right to life, states have a tightened duty to protect life. States should also take appropriate measures to address the general condition in the society, which may include the prevalence of life-threatening diseases such as HIV and other diseases, and also substance use. Harm reduction services such as drug consumption room should be considered as the necessary measure to fulfill the protect the life obligation. Right to information. Let me highlight this issue that this is also very clearly related in the context of drug policies, both as a component of the right to health and as a standalone right. Closely related to the right to information is the right to privacy, while accessibility of information, such as with regard to harm reduction information, includes, this accessibility information should include right to seek, receive, and impart information and idea concerning the health issues, such as the harm reduction related information. This right should not be impair the confidentiality of the personal health or data. In some instances, people who use drugs are forcibly committed to the treatment facilities, such as in drug rehabilitation center, in violation of their right to give informed consent of treatment. In 2012, UN Human Rights Office, ONUDC, WHO, and other several agencies jointly call upon states to shift effort from compulsory and from the compulsory and involuntary treatment service for people who use drugs towards the voluntary treatment in the community. All these rights which I discussed at the above just are applicable in the context of harm reduction services. In this regard, I would like to refer to two reports recently published by the Special Rapporteur on Right to Health of the UN Human Rights Council, which focuses on the harm reduction issues. Also, I would like take note of that. In 2023, Human Rights Council, in consensus, recognized the harm reduction as a necessary measure for accessing health, for providing health support to the people who use drugs. Also in 2024, as we know, that Commission of Narcotic Drugs recognized harm reduction as a measure to prevent overdoses. In her reports on the harm reduction, Special Rapporteur on Right to Health outlined very specific but non-exhaustive list of practical harm reduction measures based on human rights. Let me highlight few issues which she identified, or few measures. Needle and syringes program. As we know that at least 92 countries have needle and syringe program in the world. Is more country, we need more to do on this area. Then opioid antagonist therapies, WHO includes these drugs, this opioid antagonist therapy in the model list of essential medicine and recommend opioid antagonist therapy as a treatment option for the opioid dependence. As of 2022, only 88 countries offer OST, meaning that it is still highly inaccessible in many parts of the world. Now the discussion which we are having today and tomorrow, drug consumption room, Special Rapporteur highlighted that it is one of the essential harm reduction measures. The drug consumption room and supervised injection facilities. This site provide a place where people who inject drugs can self-administer their own substance without criminal penalties. We know that in many countries, the drug consumption is available currently. Current statistics shows that 100 drug consumption rooms now operate in over 17 countries, with many more likely operating underground. Where drug use is still criminal offense, we would like to recommend that police, prosecutor, and other law enforcement officials can develop policy of excluding individuals who obtain services from drug consumption facilities from prosecution. In this regard, I would like to refer very innovative position or policy taken by Lord Advocate of Scotland, where she has decided that it is not the public interest, it's not her policy to pursue any prosecution for people who is coming to the drug consumption room. And this is really interesting that this kind of prosecutorial policies or police policies could help people to obtain services from this kind of drug consumption room. Then she highlighted also drug checking issues, overdose prevention and reversal. The next point I would like to highlight, that is housing, employment, and education. Only harm reduction will not help people to recover or people taking services. Underlining determinants of health should not be conditional on the discontinuation or reduction of drug use or maintained through the mandated or compulsory test. This means that harm reduction services should be provided in line with housing needs, employment needs, and education and other services. Funding issues has been discussed. I would like to highlight that just at this point, authorities, national authorities, and other actors need to address this issue, because this is not only the crisis, funding crisis, it is a matter of life and death. Last point I would like to highlight, that is CSO participation. It is essential to include those most affected by the drug use disorder in all decision-making and policy. I'm really pleased to see that a lot of civil society and community representatives is present in this room. The Scottish Charter of the Right for People Affected by Substance Use is an example of a policy developed through a multi-stakeholders processes, reflecting the unique needs of different groups, including people who use drugs. We hope it can serve an inspiration to other countries around the world. Lastly, I would like to mention that civil society organizations in many countries currently facing restrictive policies or some repression. We are very concerned. We, from the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, we consider the civil society who works in the drug policy, they are human rights defenders. They must be protected. Conducive environment must be ensured for their work and contribution to the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaved. And the last speaker under this session is representing the UN specialized body dealing with the issues of drug policies. It's the ONUDC. And I give the floor to Tatiana Jehl with a small indication that we are running out of time, so to stick to the to stick to the time which has been foreseen.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep it to the time allocated. Good morning to everybody in the symposium. Let me start by thanking the Pompidou Group for inviting the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to participate in this symposium. And I particularly commend the Pompidou Group for the invitation of so many speakers who, as we say in the UN, work on the ground, whose experiences and sharing of views and ideas is very essential to moving forward and to adopting drug policies that also reflect the experiences on the ground. In my presentation or in my statement, I will move beyond the strictly speaking only about drug consumption rooms, and I was asked to look at the multiple dimensions that human rights and drug policies intercept. So, ladies and gentlemen, respecting, protecting, and promoting all human rights, fundamental freedoms, and the inherent dignity of all individuals, as well as the rule of law, is crucial in the development and implementation of drug policies at all levels. As Zaved mentioned just moments ago, the body of international law establishes human rights that are universal and inalienable, and the international community has continuously stressed that to effectively address the world drug problem, any policy or action must respect and preserve those rights and must be in line with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The United Nations was founded on three interdependent pillars: peace and security, development, and human rights, with none more important than the other. And these pillars are not abstract, they guide everything that we do. And so when we talk about drug policies, we must ask not only whether they work, but whether they align with these core values. When drug policies overlook human rights, they not only raise ethical concerns, they often fall short in delivering meaningful and lasting results. And we've seen how poorly designed drug policies can restrict access to medicines containing narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. They limit availability and access to prevention and treatment services, or deny due process in courtrooms where forensic standards fall short. These are not theoretical concerns. These are the real-world consequences of policies that are misaligned with the people and communities they are meant to serve. Addressing the world drug problem requires a balanced and comprehensive response. And as was mentioned many times today, this entails a UN strategy that addresses the social and economic determinants of drug use, but also causes of illicit cultivation, involvement in the illicit drug trade, while at the same time promoting human rights and public health to effectively address drug use and drug use disorders, co-occurring mental health disorders, communicable diseases, and other health-related issues. Simultaneously, a balanced approach requires robust law enforcement and effective criminal justice responses to drug trafficking, alongside international cooperation in criminal matters and appropriate forensic capacity to enable detection of substances and an understanding of market trends. This multifaceted approach acknowledges the complexity of the world drug problem and aims to ensure that national drug policies do not infringe upon fundamental rights and freedoms and deliver an effective response. Now, what does this mean in practice? First, Informed by science and evidence, we need to strengthen our focus on people that need help. Let's look at some specific aspects and start with people in need of medicines for pain, palliative care, mental health, and neurological disorders, or those undergoing surgeries. As was mentioned by Mr. Kazatchkine, ensuring adequate access to controlled substances for medical and scientific purposes lies at the core of international legal obligations, and yet remains one of the most underfunded aspects of our response. Secondly, let me highlight the rights of our most vulnerable, and those are children. The Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was drafted in 1989, is the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history. As a key instrument of international human rights law, it specifically obliges state parties to protect children from the illicit use of narcotic drugs, but also to prevent the use of children in the illicit production and trafficking of such substances. Any internationally controlled substance used outside of medical setting in any form of way may carry a risk of health-related harms or other negative consequence. And the most effective way to avoid any risk of harm associated with non-medical use of controlled substances is to prevent or delay initiation and consumption in the first place, in particular speaking about children. Insufficient investment in evidence-based strategies can result in policies that neither reduce vulnerability nor safeguard the rights of children. The UNODC WHO International Standards on Drug Use Prevention emphasize that prevention is most effective when it's rooted in developmental science, tailored to age and culture, and implemented in collaboration with sectors like education, health, and social services. Neglecting these standards risks exposing children to ineffective responses rather than fostering their healthy development, resilience, and their rights. At the same time, ensuring effective legislation that protects children from being recruited into drug trafficking is vital in preventing exploitation by criminal organizations that often target vulnerable children, using them as pawns due to their perceived lower risk of detection. And safeguarding children and their rights is essential for ensuring their safety, well-being, and future prospects, while also promoting a more just society. Third consideration, being true to the spirit of a people-centered approach also means to acknowledge that drug dependence is a health disorder. It is preventable and treatable, and many countries have acknowledged this fact in national policies, strategies, and legislations, but many still have not. Implementing a full spectrum of services along a recovery-oriented continuum of care is key to the protection of rights of people with drug use disorders, but also their families. The UNODC WHO International Standards for the Treatment of Drug Use Disorders call for treatment that is person-centered, human rights-based, and grounded in scientific evidence. Drug policies should enable individuals with drug use disorders access evidence-based treatment options, and families should have access to support to help them navigate the challenges associated with these disorders and recovery of their loved ones. And this brings me directly to the concept of harm reduction. Harm reduction should not be seen as a complete alternative to treatment. Harm reduction services should be an integral part of the comprehensive system of care, and when incorporated as such, they effectively help those who seek support, providing yet another point of contact with treatment, but also medical care and other health or social services. Drug consumption rooms are facilities operating to help mitigate the public health issues associated with drug use, such as reducing the incidence of drug-related deaths and the transmission of diseases such as HIV and hepatitis, while providing a safe and non-judgmental space for people who use drugs. And they can provide invaluable insights into drug use patterns and local drug markets. While some countries continue to support consumption rooms as part of their harm reduction scheme, other countries have reversed their policies due to public safety concerns or opposition from certain neighborhoods. There is no wrong door to seek support. At every stage of the treatment continuum, at every stage of the disorder, and across a variety of settings, from low-threshold outreach services to consumption rooms to intensive inpatient or residential treatment, Services offer a path to recovery when a person is ready. Fourth consideration I would like to mention when designing policies aligned with human rights is linked to illicit manufacture, production, and trafficking. Human rights abuses can stem from aggressive law enforcement operations, including extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention, and disproportionate sentencing, and we have seen that in the past in different parts of the world. UNODC programming advocates for criminal justice responses grounded in international standards and norms, such as the principle of proportionality, with alternatives to conviction or punishment effectively applied, in particular in countries where possession for personal use is a drug-related offense. Women, persons in contact with the criminal justice system, as well as those that find themselves in humanitarian settings around the world, require even more attention, and more work needs to be done to ensure their rights are protected. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, the world drug problem is complex and multifaceted, and there is no one solution, and responses do need to be balanced, comprehensive, science-informed, and rights-based. We have many of the tools. We have established practices, we have normative guidance, and operational models. And what we need is sustained commitment, adequate resources, and coordinated cross-sectoral action at national, regional, and multilateral levels. And this brings me to my final point, the utmost importance of cooperation and information sharing at all levels. Working together at local, national, regional, and international levels to increase knowledge of drugs, of drug markets, of approaches that work in your communities, in your regions and cities, and of the impact drugs have on the health of your population, allows to keep abreast of new developments and adapt strategies respectful of local or regional specificities. And by shaping drug policies that respect, protect, and fulfill human rights, we not only uphold international legal obligations, we also enhance effectiveness of drug policies and foster a global environment where respect for human rights and effective drug-related responses and services go hand in hand for the benefit of all, individuals and communities alike. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. And this concludes our global session.